Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon. Good evening, depending where you are. Oh, hello, everyone. Wonderful. Hi. Yes, Synth. Hi, you found us. I'm very happy that you found us. All right. This is great. Okay, are you gonna hop up? He seems unable to make up his mind. I might have a co-host today. Hold on, for those of you that don't know Maple, this is our Maple. I'm sitting on like a swivel chair, so it's like a big kind of half circle, and so that's why he's taking advantage of that extra that extra space right now. All right. So, let's get this started. Oh, the cat doesn't bother the birds flying loose. Our birds don't fly loose. The only bird that's loose is our parrot, Julia, and the parakeets and our dove, they're in a cage. They do get exercise when the cats are put away in the room. They don't bother our parrot though. She is rather large and she can defend herself and she walks up to them. They've established a great little relationship and Julia walks up to our cats, meows at them. So yeah, so she's fine. So let's see here. Mary Jo. Let's see. I'm looking for a suggestion for a plant in a west window that gets very hot from 4 to 6. Okay, yeah. So it's definitely a western window because that's during, like, they call it golden hour. So that golden times, that's when it gets really intense. And it tends to be on average around like 5 p.m. So that 4 to 6 range. Yes. And I received a macrame hanging. And yes, throwback, definitely. I love macrames. I have them around the house. And the only place to hang it is in that west window. It would be a 7-inch pot. All right. We need something that would be able to deal with even a few hours of very intense light. Western windows tend to get pretty direct light throughout the day, but it intensifies in that late afternoon, early evening. So something that might be okay in a Western window might be okay to probably potentially put some type of cactus, not a holiday cacti, definitely not a holiday cacti, but something like maybe a Peruvian apple cactus might be nice. Oh, but it's a hanging macrame, so this is something that you want to cascade. So probably maybe like a Ceropigia. So something like a string of hearts, silver glory. I have my silver glory in my western window. I had to move the linearis because I think it was just getting a little too hot, but I think the silver glory might be a really nice addition there. And Cheryl, that I look extra planty today. Thank you. Yeah, I was like, all right, got the leaves going and got the little leaf going, little monstera leaf, keeping it simple. Let's get started today with the plant clinic. So that's what we're going to be doing today. Of course, feel free to drop questions in the chat. Don't feel like you have to show your face in the video or anything like that. So feel free to drop questions in the chat. But yeah, what we're going to basically be doing is folks can have this chance to come on video with a plant if they'd like and say, hey, let's grab a plant. And this is a great example. So I just picked this guy up about a week ago. And so it's been going through its acclimation process. So this is a prayer plant, a Maranta. And so this was the oldest, one of the largest leaves on it, and so which means it's one of the oldest. So this one is starting to go. Rest of the plant's looking okay. It was a little beat up when I got it, but I can attribute this potentially to just the acclimation, right? There's no pests. It's on my desk because I was giving it a good look last night. So the way the plant clinic works is essentially this. Gonna show me your plant. What might be the issue? Maybe this is a symptom, right? You see some discoloration. So a leaf is yellowing. Another way of saying that is a leaf is getting chlorotic, right? So it's turning yellow. And then we figure out, all right, what could be potentially causing this? So for instance, in this little situation here, more than likely it's part of the acclimation process. It's getting used to the new house. It was at the plant shop. And yeah, one leaf out of everything is not bad at all. So far, so good. It's been doing pretty lovely. It moves a lot, hence the name prayer plants. If those of you who have never had a prayer plant. They are just so much fun. I have a few prayer plants, but I love this variety, really cool. Hoping to find the variegated version. The one time I did get a cutting of a variegated prayer plant, it was beautiful, so much white, absolutely gorgeous, and it was covered in mealy bugs. And I was so sad because it's literally, I unpacked it, it was delivered to me. I unpacked it and I could see it had huge mealy bugs on it. And the person was really nice and gave me a refund, but yeah, and let me just keep it. And I tried to keep it alive and it did put out a couple leaves and it seemed like it was going to be okay. And then I, yeah, I think the mealy bugs, it was just too much. But yeah, they make great plants, and they put out a lot of growth rather quickly. All right. So, Hank, what kind of care do you recommend for corn plants and money trees? I'm not sure how frequently to water, and when I do, the leaves turn brown or drop off. Good question. So, two different plants, right? We got the corn plants, which are a Dracaena. They are Dracaena, and then you have the money trees, which is Pachira aquatica. For money trees, on average, it tends to be about 10 to 14 days between watering. So I found also that a good bottom water is very much appreciated by the money tree. They like bright indirect light. They get burned by intense direct light. So you want to avoid that. But yes, the watering tends to be about every 10 to 14 days. I water mine about every 2 weeks. They really like also a nice draining mix, similarly to that Dracaena, to the corn plant. So the mix would be very similar. And in terms of the Dracaena, it depends how large it is. And with a corn plant, usually they have the thicker stalk. It can be anywhere from a week to 2 weeks. With the thicker stalk Dracaena, they can go longer. So they can go up to 2 weeks or so. But the thinner Dracaena, you might notice that after a week, their leaves might start to flop a little bit, especially if your home is extra warm and really bright. You might actually have to water a Dracaena slightly more. But the Pachira aquatica, they have much more of a woody stem, so you can give it a little extra time between watering that. But yes, it really depends on the size of the Dracaena. So anywhere from a week to 2 weeks, depending on the thickness of the trunk of the Dracaena and how warm your home is. With money trees, on average, it's about 10 to 14 days. But yeah, and in terms of, and how much water do I give them when I do water? I give them a good soak. So if you bottom water them, that's a nice even saturation point. So that's the easiest way, is to just give them a good bottom water. But I'm wondering why, if the leaves turn brown and drop off. So to think about what might be causing that kind of action. So a couple things. One, it could be the type of water you're using. So it could be that maybe your water could be rather hard. That could be an issue. So that means it's like high mineralization, high salt. That could be something that's happening if it's happening when you water. Another thing is sometimes inconsistent watering. So I've done this if I've had a very busy couple weeks. My plants that usually get watered like every 2 weeks might end up getting watered every 3 weeks, something like that. And so what ends up happening is if those roots get severely dehydrated and it's been too long since they got watered, then what ends up happening is when you do water them, it's too much water and those dead roots start to rot. And that can be end up being shown in the leaves dropping and turning brown, because it's just a symptom of root rot. But then that can happen too when you overwater. So if you're watering too often and the soil's really saturated, and then you still water before it's completely dry, for both a money tree and a Dracaena, I would encourage you to wait till it's completely dry before watering them. If you are watering when it's still damp, then that could also cause root rot. The browning and the dropping of the leaves, the turning brown and then falling off, that tells me there might be something going on with those roots. And what sucks is that root rot can happen with both underwatering and overwatering. I would say to just wait till they're completely dry, give them a good bottom water. If you think your water might be hard or there might be something going on there, try with a Poland spring or some type of spring water and see if you get that same reaction, just as an experiment to see if maybe it's your water as well. My gut is telling me it's probably related to like inconsistent watering, but just try the spring water. And someone just asked, Brenda asked, what kind of water would you suggest for a prayer plant like the Maranta, and how often should it be watered? So with the Maranta, I let them tell me because they tend to be very different depending on the plant. I noticed that some of my prayer plants, it can be almost like on a week, like clockwork, and some can go a little bit longer without the water. I use spring water for my calatheas and my prayer plants. So all my prayer plants, so calatheas, marantas, Japertias. A lot of calatheas have been reclassified as Japortias. So I've been trying to make sure I learned that gene. What else do I water with spring water? My air plant and my, what's over there? A peace lily. My peace lily. I use spring water for that only because they're very sensitive to tap water. So not that I've never watered them with tap water. I have, if I'm in a pinch and I need to water them and I don't have spring water, I've watered them with tap water. And usually they reward me with a little like crisping on the edge or something like that, but not always. Sometimes they're perfectly fine and they don't have a negative reaction. But I try to, for the most part, do spring water, and also I always supplement with aquarium water as well. But that one, that we put chemicals in there so it doesn't have like excess chlorine and stuff, doesn't necessarily change the amount of mineralization in it. And the pH is just about 7 here in New York City for our water. So I don't have to worry too much about it being too alkaline or too acidic. But yeah, so I hope that works. Trisha, I bought a rubber tree plant about 3 weeks ago and it seems really healthy, but there are tiny spots around the edges of some of the leaves. It doesn't have pests that I see, and I tried rubbing it off, but I cannot. I even used my nail, but it didn't work either. Any idea what these could be? Yes, especially because you're saying it's a rubber tree. So rubber trees, a lot of ficus, they have, what's it called? Kind of larger stomata, or they have larger pores or glands along their leaves sometimes, especially on the bigger leaves. It's much more visible. So this happens with a couple plants. Even with some, here I have this, my giant El Chaco red. You can actually see the little pores because they're bigger leaves, magnified, especially on glossy leaves. You can really see them, but I found you can see them a lot on ficus plants, so fig family plants. So yeah, they're not necessarily a pest. It could just be the pores on the plant. So they're just a little bit more visible. And so it's a little more striking because you're like, what are these dots? But yeah, so they're more than likely either stomata or some type of extrafloral nectaries in some plants. Like with my Chaco, it has those large dots on the back and right where the petiole, so the little stem connects to the leaf. And sometimes it shoots out, basically it like drips nectar onto the leaves that then freaks us out because we'll pass by, we see it, we're like, oh gosh, making sure that there's nothing on there, and it's, oh no, it's just nectar. But yes, so they might just be pores or glands that you're able to see, because I see that a lot on ficus. Elaine, so I'm recently having problems that I never had for years with a Christmas cactus. The leaves are becoming soft and then they fall off. I do not have the plant in direct sunlight, but just highlight in a highlight area. The dirt has not been changed in many years because it would be a near impossible task. Okay, Elaine. Yes, a couple things there. So if they're becoming very soft and to the point where you just tap and the little phylloclades, so they're also called cladodes, these little sections, the segments of the Christmas cactus. So if you even just touch them, it's like they're really thin and they almost look wrinkly and like super thin, and then even just touching them, they just come off. So that's because they've been completely dehydrated. Now, that doesn't mean that you're not trying to water them. You might be like, hey, I'm watering it the exact same amount. The problem could be there could be something up with the substrate. The substrate could have become compacted to the point where it's hydrophobic. So the water isn't permeating very well through that substrate. Water isn't getting to the roots, and therefore the plant is really thirsty and you're getting that reaction. That sounds like the most likely culprit, is that it's just not getting fully saturated. So either the substrate is completely compacted, that's one potential choice, or it could also be maybe the substrate was retaining too much moisture and it started to damage those roots. So therefore the roots can no longer do their job, so they can't take up water effectively, which then in turn the plant reacts like this because it's severely dehydrated. It's very odd, especially if it's been in the same substrate. I'm assuming you haven't changed your care, and if it's been in the same spot for many years, my gut is telling me there's something up with those roots. So they're either being deprived of water or they're just not able to take up water effectively. And yes, repotting them is probably, as you said, is going to be a near impossible task, but checking out those roots might be your best bet to ensure that you can try to identify the issue. If it's rotting roots, you would have to clip those off, clean that, let the plant dry for like at least a day, and then repot it. Yeah, what you could do, so if you just want to kind of experiment to see, okay, maybe it's just that the substrate's compacted, try to aerate your substrate. Maybe use like a chopstick or a barbecue skewer, and very gently, so don't stab it, but rather twist it to get it to make a couple holes in that substrate. It allows water to go in, lets oxygen go in, and try to see if the next time you water, do that before the next time you water, see if you notice any change, just to see in case it might be that. How do you ever get rid of mealy bugs invaded my orchids this year? Yes, mealy bugs. So a couple things. So with mealy bugs, quite honestly, out of all the pests, I would probably want aphids and mealy bugs rather than thrips are horrendous. Thrips are just a battle. They're a battle. Spider mites, it's something you can deal with. You can potentially save your plant. Thrips, sometimes more than likely, it's really hard to save your plant. But mealy bugs, manageable. One thing is also just rinsing off your plant, really. So you can do that. You can use a dish soap. Just make sure it's not a degreasing dish soap. So things like Dawn or Power Wash or those types of things, they can actually strip the wax coating off of the leaves. And all leaves have a waxy kind of coating. Certain leaves have more than others. So if you plants that live in, for instance, in more tropical, sunny areas, they tend to have glossier leaves, and it's because they have actually a higher amount of that cuticle wax protecting them. It's like sunblock. So if you use a degreasing soap, what ends up happening is it starts to deteriorate that covering, that kind of coating. So make sure it's a non-degreasing. So something like a Castile shears is great. Something that's gentle but will still get the job done. So you can take a little bit of that, just a couple drops. You can put them into a little squirt bottle, fill the rest with water. You can also add a little bit of rubbing alcohol to that, give it a little mix, spray down your plant really well, tilt your plant as well. So I always want to tell folks, so tilt your plant like this if you're spraying and then you're washing it, because if you do this, what ends up happening is that all that soap ends up in your soil. And then it's a disaster because you keep trying to rinse the soil and it keeps bubbling and it keeps bubbling, and then you've over saturated that soil. So you just want to avoid that completely. But giving that a good spray, giving it a good rinse, and then after the rinsing process, so you could spray it, hold it for up to 5 minutes, just stand there, rinse it out really well with your hands, go massage those stems, really get into any nooks and crannies that you can. Then afterwards, you're going to sit down with cotton swabs, so Q-tips and rubbing alcohol. And then you're going to go in with a fine tooth comb. So you're going to go in with your Q-tip and you're going to go all under the leaves, in the little nooks and crannies, anywhere where mealybugs might have created nest sites. So especially if these big kind of cottony egg sac, the female mealybugs, they just stay in one place. The females barely move. It's the young and the males that are the ones that are moving around. The females, they find a spot, they latch in to suck your plant juices and produce babies. So they don't really move as much. So they're easy to pick off. But the minute that you touch them with that rubbing alcohol, they turn, you just watch them turn black. There you go. And then just burn. And you can do that. But you have to be consistent. So that's something you don't want to do any less than every 6 weeks, at least once a week, to really keep it from coming back. It's better if you go on and do it for at least 10 weeks to really ensure you got everything. But yeah, what I like to do preventatively too, is if a plant that I had is prone to them, like Hoya, for instance, are highly prone to mealybugs. So doing something like spraying them with rubbing alcohol every time I water my Hoya, I spray them, even if I see nothing, just preventatively. So in case anything got on there, any babies, I spray it, crisis averted. So you could do that too. But I know mealybugs, they can be annoying, but out of all the other pests, I feel like they're one of the more manageable ones. Judy, my dumb cane's lower leaves are turning yellow and they wilt, and I water it once a week. What's going on with it? You might be watering a bit too often. So a dumb cane, a Dieffenbach, they're similar to that with the Dracaena, that when they have a thicker trunk, this means they actually tend to retain moisture a little bit longer. So you can actually get away with waiting a little bit longer between watering. So something like, especially if it's the lower leaves and they're turning yellow and they're dying off, that could be a sign of root rot. It's just getting excessively watered. I would say to wait, try 10 days, 10 days between watering. If you see that it's doing fine, even up to 2 weeks with Dieffenbachias. But when they're smaller, if it's a tiny Dieffenbachia, then 7 to 10 days makes sense. Larger Dieffenbachia, if it's not in a really high light situation, you can definitely wait up to 2 weeks. I would say just try to space out the watering a little bit and see what's going on, because that sounds like it might be overwatering. All right, Sue, have a great time. Have a great time in class. Mealy bugs. So Cheryl's asking neem oil. Good question. So with neem oil, the issue with neem oil is that it's only useful when it is still wet, basically, when it's still oily. Once it dries, the effectiveness really drops. And while it's okay, I guess, if you're trying to coat the actual mealybugs while they're on the surface of the plant. So if you spray them with a neem oil mixture and you're completely saturating them, that's helpful to gather some of those babies. But the problem is that once it dries, it's not going to keep your plant safe. And then on the flip side, if let's say you're like, okay, cool, I'll just keep spraying it, so it's constantly oily, basically. The downside to that is that if you are using neem oil on your plants, you actually have to remove them from direct sunlight for up to a week, for 5 to 7 days, because the neem oil will actually make them a much more photosensitive. So they become just more likely to get sunburned. That's where that kind of, okay, if I treat the plant with neem oil, but then you have to move it. But then if you're trying to consistently treat it, you can't keep it where you had it. If you had it pretty close to a window, it gets very frustrating. You're like, so yeah, neem oil isn't the most effective thing. It can be used, but I think I would lean more towards a soap and rubbing alcohol. And someone's asking how much rubbing alcohol to how much water. Good question. In many cases, I just use straight up rubbing alcohol when I'm just doing the regular spray. If I were doing a treatment where I'm washing the plant, so I have a little bit of soap, so I would probably do about 1/3 rubbing alcohol, a couple drops of soap, and then fill up the rest with water. But yeah, so that tends to be That tends to be a good mix. I haven't seen plants that I've sprayed straight rubbing alcohol on begonias, on a bunch of different plants, and I haven't had a bad experience in terms of burning. But if you're trying to use rubbing alcohol on your plant for the first time, and especially if it's very thin foliage, do a test spot. So just spray a certain like edge of a leaf or a smaller leaf, or maybe a leaf that already has damage, and see if your plant reacts negatively before you completely spray the plant with rubbing alcohol. But usually they don't have a problem, but every plant's different, so you never know. Cheryl, oh, you're very welcome. Hate scale and mealybugs. Yes, and scale, I totally forgot about scale. Mealybugs are related to scale. They're considered a scale insect. But yeah, I think that's also another one that it's probably really annoying to get rid of, but they're very slow. It's something that it's difficult to really completely spread to your collection in very quickly. It's something that if you catch, you can nip in the bud and keep it going. With scale, yeah, yes, definitely try Castile. Drop any questions in the chat. If anybody wants to come on video, just let me know and I will spotlight you. And yeah, you can show me what's going on. I was going to show you something for my botany class. So I got this really cool model of a dicot of a flower, of a dicot flower. And so I'm pretty excited. I was like, oh, this is so neat. So for any fellow plant nerds, you might appreciate this this model. I'm excited to use it during my sessions. And all the pieces come out. Pretty excited about that. I have quite a few models for teaching. I have the plant cell and plant seed growth and things like that. So always, it's like my living room is my classroom. So I have a lot of posters and fun things like that. Patricia, what kind of care is needed for syngoniums? Question. So syngoniums, they can be very, for one thing, they're very prone to thrips. I'll tell you that. Thrips and spider mites first. So they can be pretty low maintenance if you have them already set up in like really good humidity and things like that, that you don't really have to worry about them too much. You can let them be. Depends on how small they are. Smaller ones, you might find yourself watering them at least once a week. It could actually be a little bit sooner. Larger syngonium, they can go maybe up to 10 days or so, but the humidity tends to be a really big factor with syngoniums. They will start to crisp up. They will start to, they also, if you waited too long to water them, they start to do the drooping. Similar to peace lily, they start to do that drooping. And if you waited too long, it's actually, sometimes they don't come back up. Do I have a picture of a syngonium? Oh, I can definitely screen share. So give me 1 second. Let me, syngonium. Yes, for those of you that might not be familiar with what a syngonium is. Happy to do this. So there's different types. So in terms of lighting, this is going to be vastly different depending on the variety that you have. So for instance, if you see a lot of these green ones, darker green ones, these tend to be okay in an eastern window, definitely pulled away from a western or southern window, and they're going to be okay. If it has a lot of pink, they tend to be okay in this brighter indirect light. But if they have a lot of white, like these, let me see here, like this variegated variety. So this white can tend to burn really easily. So if it's in a brighter situation, you might notice it starts to burn quite literally. It starts to turn black, or it might start to get the browning around the edge and then some like splotches. And that also tends to mean that it could just be getting burned. And so this can definitely happen. And always remember that with the shifting of seasons, it changes the intensity of light. So sometimes a lot of our plants are really happy in a wind during the winter, and they're getting this bright light. but it's not that intense. And then as soon as spring starts to become summer, that's when the light starts to actually intensify. And that's when you might notice, wow, my plant that has been happy there since October is now turning brown or it's getting burned. What's going on? It's been in the same spot, but the sun has changed. So always keep that in mind. It's gonna become much more intense. It's gonna cause that burning. They are toxic, so please be very mindful of this. You can get these to grow up a cocoa coir pole, a moss pole. I like to let these cascade, so I like the ones that will just drop and get very viney. I really like them like this. And a lot of them, this is an immature form of the leaf. So this, what you're seeing here, this kind of arrowhead, which that's one of the common names is arrowhead vine. So that arrowhead shape, which I believe is the botanical term is Sagittarius, if I'm not mistaken. This is the immature leaf. And when the plant becomes much more mature, the leaf shape actually changes. So if any of you have had a syngonium for several years, or you have one that you let climb, that kind of morphological change of the leaves, like the shape of the leaf change, that is going to be sometimes happens a little bit faster, but they can end up looking like this. Here's just a couple examples here, but this one, especially the one in the middle and the ones up that have more of a rabbit ear type of structure. So you can start to see that as the leaves start to mature a little bit more. There's such a great mix of shapes, of colors. This is something you can definitely collect very easily and pretty inexpensively. Even the variegated albos that we just looked at, they're dropping in price significantly. So they're much more accessible now. You can definitely try to find these. There's something that at least like the pink varieties, the greens are definitely, and the hollies, which have a lot more white. Those are probably the most prevalent that you're going to find in like big box stores. The Winlandia, I think that's how you pronounce it. That one's becoming much more popular, as is the Janocardi Road, which is the one here that has the red back and the dark green on the front. There's two leaves here in the example. So those are becoming much more popular. So you might be seeing that, as is the Aurea, which is the one that has, it's like the albo, but instead of where it's white, it's like a lime green, yellow kind of color. Those are becoming much more popular. But yeah, so when they're smaller, you're going to probably find yourself at least once a week watering it. But as they get larger, that can definitely shift to maybe anywhere from like 10 days or so. It's just the humidity. So you want to make sure that your humidity is at least 50% around them. Doesn't mean your whole house has to be 50%, but at least in that area. That's going to just prevent that crisping that they are prone to. The syngoniums are really cool. I had a really large collection, and back in like 2017, something like that, 2017, 2016, I had a thrip outbreak in my bathroom, and I had these all in my bathroom because they enjoyed the extra humidity. I had these, over a dozen different types of syngoniums in my bathroom. And I brought home one that had thrips, and it introduced them to the entire collection there. Wiped everything out except for some pothos that are still there, some water propagations that I had of spider plants and things like that, but it wiped out all of my syngonium. Be careful. Be very careful with thrips. Just always check them very thoroughly before introducing them. And especially, that's when I started instituting. I had been collecting for a while, and I hadn't really had a big infestation of anything. So I very naively gave it a quick once over and introduced it to the rest of the collection, instead of what I do now, where I quarantine all of our plants and I leave them in one corner of the living room away from all the other plants for about 2 to 3 weeks, where I can monitor them. I can make sure there's nothing going on before I introduce them to the collection. So I had to learn that the hard way. So I always tell my sad syngonium thrip story, because as a cautionary tale, please don't do that, because that was terrible. And there were some pretty costly in that collection. So I was pretty sad about that. But there's just some really gorgeous ones. you can definitely get. These are the ones that have more pink. So there's they call them Berry Illusion. And so that has like a green base and then pink on top. Those are super popular. You can find them at like Home Depot, Lowe's, super easy. But the ones that you're seeing here, that it's much more of a creamy kind of white base with pink, that's where you start to see the pricing go up. Really beautiful plants. But yeah, very prone to root rot as well. So you don't want to keep them moist at all times. A lot of folks will say, oh yeah, keep them moist, but this can be their downfall. They are an aroid, so they're related to Monstera and Philodendron and Epipremnums like pothos. So they don't want to sit. They don't want to definitely sit in water. So I hope that helps. Is a caladium a syngonium? No. Caladiums are related to syngoniums though. So they are related to a syngonium. They're like cousins. But no, a caladium is different than a syngonium. And with the syngonium, they're a vining hemiepiphytic vine, while caladiums actually grow from bulbs or basically from corms instead. So they don't crawl up the tree. So syngoniums can be in a calathea, and the calatheas require more humidity. Yes, calatheas definitely, they would very much appreciate more humidity. They are very quick to crisp up otherwise. So you will have very crispy calathea if that humidity is too low. And the syngoniums will thrive in a higher humidity. So that's perfectly fine. Hank asks, can the caladiums be brought inside for the winter? If you get a very cold winter where it's like a complete freeze, then you can do so, because the caladiums will go into dormancy when it gets colder, but sometimes they won't survive if there's actually a deep freeze in your soil. So bringing them in and then starting them back up in the spring, you can totally do that. They'll keep coming back, caladiums. So I've seen lots of folk plant them like in their lawns, but then yeah, they bring them back in. So totally fine. Judy, I have lost 2 plants to spider mites. I've tried neem oil, but it doesn't seem to be effective. I understand now why. Should I try the Castile soap and alcohol? With spider mites, yes, you could totally use that same combination. The issue with spider mites that is different than with these other types of pests is that these other types of pests are actual insects. Spider mites are not insects. Spider mites are arachnids. So they're related to spiders, to scorpions. So what you actually need to get if you wanted to really attack them is a miticide. So there's pesticides, but not all pesticides are most pesticides are insecticides, but not all pesticides are miticides. So can't say that real fast. But because a miticide is what is going to actually kill mites, so mites that are in that arachnid family. So if you just try to attack them with something that's only an insecticide, it's going to be ineffective. And neem oil tends to do more for insects. It's more as insect repellent. So neem oil, that I should do a whole class on neem oil, but it's really interesting because like neem leaves were used, they would be dried and then put into the books of pages to kind of keep insects from chewing up the pages. So it's more so used as a deterrent. And so it's really interesting how it's blown up and now it's like a big insecticide. Yeah. Deanna, are the lectures scheduled for every Monday? So this is, yeah, every Monday. We're just switching it up. It's not going to be just a regular class. So it's going to be class, then Q&A, then plant clinic. It works very similarly to a Q&A, but folks can go on camera, show me your plant, and we can talk about what's going on with that plant. And if folks can also pipe in. So if you go, hey, yeah, I had that same issue and I can totally recommend this. So that's totally fine on plant clinic days. And then following that would be like open forum days, like next week. So with the open forum, it's just a hangout. So we can talk about anything. Of course, I answer questions, but if folks want to come off mute and just talk, if they want to share something about their collection, if folks want to do maybe a little class themselves, or we can have guest speakers. If you just want to talk for 10 minutes about your euphorbia collection or anything like that, let me know. We can totally set that up. And so it's just going to be like a group hangout where It's just plant stuff. And hey, how can I see the recording? Yes. So I had an issue with Vimeo this last week, so I had to just put it up on a Dropbox. So let me pull that up. I will stick it here in the chat. So if anybody wants to go back and watch that. There we go. Yeah, indoor gardening session would be cool. Yeah, absolutely. I want to set up my camera and film myself while I'm doing some plant chores and things too, to kind of show folks, because I get a lot of questions like that, like what's your care routine, how long does it take, and things like that. So for instance, like the plants behind me, that can easily take about 2 hours doing these guys, because then I have to take everything off, put it on this table that's in front of me, clean the whole surface. I like to clean the entire desk, vacuum it, clean all that, wipe down the walls, the shelves, put the shelves back, and then each plant is watered, checked, sprayed, everything, and then put back. And so that easily is at least 2 hours of my time. And that's just, and right behind me, I have 52 different plants, and we have over 300 in the house. So I want to start setting up. I just got this really cool stand for my phone that's like my height. So I'm going to try to film some time lapses and videos like that, also to really show folks how to manage larger collections, things like that. Yeah, 2 hours. Yeah, I know. Easily. What I've done for a lot of my plants, and I'm going to do a video on it as well, is for instance, I have a succulent cacti collection that's in my bedroom up on a higher shelf. And so what I did is I organized that in a way that they all have reservoirs. So I can just go around with a pitcher and just put water in the reservoir. And it's basically like a long little container. And so you put the plants in there, and I bottom water them like that. And it's super easy, less mess. I just have to be very precise with how much water I use, but that's the easiest way to water that whole portion of the collection without bringing everything down. I can just climb up on my ladder, give them a quick look if I have to spray anything. But those are all like cacti, euphorbia. They don't really have like leaves and things that I have to prune back or anything. So it's more of a quick check, spray, water. And so it helps that I have a lot of those types of containers. It really does. What are the light and water requirements for Philodendron Brazil? The leaves are turning yellow and dropping. So I brought her into a brighter location. Some tips are browning, some look good. I've had it for 2 months. I repotted it into an airy mix 2 weeks ago. I can show it on camera. Sure, Tanya, absolutely. Hold on 1 second. Hi, let me add a spotlight. There we go. Feel free to unmute yourself.
Okay.
Hi.
Thank you. I love this. You make my Mondays. I'm in New York too. I'm in Washington Heights. Yeah, I got this at Home Depot 2 months ago and it looked good. It was the roots were starting to come out the bottom and it had a string. So I thought that meant it needed a lot of water, but I know I'm prone to overwatering. So I tried not to. And this tag actually says it's a Philodendron Brazil, which I knew it was. And it says low light. And that just didn't seem right. And everywhere I look, it tells me bright light or indirect bright light. So I had it in low light and it was okay, but it would get droopy. I just can't figure out. I just keep feeling like I'm doing the wrong thing. But like I just noticed a couple days ago, this is what the leaves were looking like when I had it over in there where the light is lower. And like I said, I thought I overwatered, but these little tips are drying up. But there's new ones coming in that look fine in the middle, but like on the ends, yeah, it was a lot fuller like this. This is what I mean when I say it's drying up. I don't know if it's too much water, not enough water, too bright, not bright enough. I'm completely confused.
Okay. And you already repotted it into a better mix, right? So that's...
Yeah, it's soil, perlite, and orchid bark.
Perfect. Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, they definitely appreciate an airier mix. A lot of the mixes that you get when you get them from big box store, they tend to be very like peat and cocoa coir like heavy. It really either retains too much water or it ends up becoming hydrophobic. So it basically doesn't let the water really soak through. So with these guys, yes, they are labeled as low light because a lot of philodendrons, they live on like the forest floor or they climb trees. So they're protected from the light, from
Okay.
direct light by that canopy of the tree leaves, basically give them that shade. But philodendron Brazil specifically, they can put up with a higher light situation. I just wouldn't recommend putting them right up against the window if it's like a west or southern exposure.
Yeah, it's only because the building right next door, it
Oh, it's
doesn't.
like it has an
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, yeah.
So that's when you can get away with it. So for instance, like we have a western exposure and I'm able to put a lot of our plants there because it's a courtyard. So it's like a square. So like my
Right.
window's there, but there's a wall right across. While I get some brighter light that a lot of like the cacti and stuff that I have around it appreciate, it's not full force.
Yeah.
So if you're in that situation, that's great. I found like I have my Brazil pulled away from that western window, and it's the western window in our kitchen pulled away. So it does get like a beam of straight light, and it's perfectly fine. So I think that the brighter situation is probably going to be perfectly fine. The yellowing that you're seeing, it could also be after repotting. Plants are trying to kind of reestablish themselves into that new mix. So
Right.
it's very common that you might lose a couple leaves. There might be some yellowing. Some areas might dehydrate because, again, the roots aren't at their full
Oh,
capacity.
okay.
So they got moved. And so they're not working how they should be working. Unfortunately. So you might be seeing like those hints of dehydration, and you're like, but I'm watering, it's perfectly fine. It's just the roots aren't working at their full capacity right now. So I would say, so brighter situation seems perfectly fine. You did right with putting it in an airier type of mix. I would say, do you know what the humidity situation is?
I do. Told you I've been watching. So
Yes.
so right now here it's 80 degrees and 61% humidity. This is my humidity room.
Perfect. No, that's
Yeah.
perfect. Yeah, and you're saying it's putting out new growth, and that new growth is looking really bright and
Yeah, here at
gorgeous.
the top, in the middle here, there's new little buds coming up.
Yeah.
There
So
are there is new stuff.
okay. So I would say it could be chalked up to having been in this like kind of poor kind of mix, wasn't in the best lighting situation, then it got repotted. So it's been through a little bit of stress
Okay.
in the last couple of weeks. We could attribute that potentially to those stressors, but especially if it's pushing out new growth, that's the best sign.
Okay.
I think you're on the right trajectory.
So like watering, should it stay moist or should it dry out?
No. Yeah, let it
Dry out. Okay.
definitely let it dry out. They do like bottom watering. So I bottom water my philodendrons.
Okay.
So I do recommend that just because then it's nice and saturated. And then I let them completely dry out completely.
Okay.
So you might find yourself, if it's in a brighter situation, it might dry a little bit faster. So just double check, just make sure it's not damp before you water it. So it might end up being maybe like every 7 to 10 days. A lot of my philodendrons, because I have them pulled away from the window, it tends to be about 2 weeks, ends up being that sweet spot.
Okay. And how about, do I need to fertilize this or not?
Good question. So philodendron during the growing season, they do being fed, but just make sure if whatever it is that you're using is super, super diluted because they are prone to fertilizer burn. So they can
Okay.
easily get burned that way.
This is what I have.
Ooh, okay. Yes, that one's really great too. So you can definitely use that. Just make sure that you are diluting like an extra 2 times more than it's recommending. So just to be safe. But
Got it.
philodendron and monstera, especially like during the growing season, don't do it more than once a month.
Okay.
The only way you can get away with doing something like that a little bit more often is if it's severely diluted. It's like a drop in like a gallon. Then you can get away with doing it a little bit more often. But if you're going to be doing an application once a month, is a safe amount to avoid any potential burn.
Okay,
Tanya,
great.
what brand fertilizer was that, Tanya?
It is Espoma.
Espoma.
Espoma, and it's just
Indoor.
called Indoor. Okay.
Indoor
Organic.
organic.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great,
Yeah.
thank you.
I can put it in the chat too.
Thank you.
Sure.
Let me show you here. Okay. I have my little thing here. So I tend to use more aquarium water than anything, but I have Espoma.
Ah,
Espoma is great. And this one, the Bonnie for herb, this is like more for herbs and veggies. This one's great. And then this orchid one, which is a powder. This is great for Hoyas as well. So it really works because for orchids especially, but for other epiphytic type of plants, I found that this powder is really great for Hoyas and epiphytic cacti. So what are they called? The name escaped me. Rick-rack cactus and things like that. The holiday cacti, so Christmas cacti, Thanksgiving cacti. Highly recommend. And I just picked up some Super Thrive that I'm going to experiment with.
okay.
So I haven't tried Super Thrive yet, but I'm gonna try because I have quite a few plants in water, and I've heard that it's great for, if you dilute it really well, for hydroponic setups. So experiments will come.
Lynn, the orchid fertilizer that you just showed, was that be good for your syngoniums too, since they're like hemi-epiphytic?
Yeah, I mean, you can. It's a very gentle fertilizer.
Okay.
I haven't used it for my own syngoniums. It's gentle enough where it's okay for my epiphytic cacti. And so epiphytic cacti tend to be very low feeders. They're in a living situation where they're not getting a high nutrient rich type of like substrate because they're living on trees and things like that. It's more like any dead leaf matter or any of that might break down by the roots that ends up feeding them, or in some cases even bird poop. A lot of bromeliads like air plants and things like that, that's one of their main sources of nitrogen, is actually like bird poop. So if you are trying to feed your bromeliads, your air plants, make sure that you are using a bromeliad fertilizer, because that's a totally different type of nitrogen, because bromeliads actually take it up much more directly through their leaves. And so it's a whole different type of fertilizer that you want to use for them. But it's neat. It's neat.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. All right, let's see here. Oh, Synth, is the wall behind you to your right painted or is it wallpaper? Good question. So this is actually, so I had painted the wall white, and then this is actually a vinyl sticker. It's a huge sticker, and that I put up. That's also a vinyl sticker. It's all like string of pearls. I have these on each door here, but yeah, I can put the links. I can put the links in the Facebook group. I love them. And they are removable. They don't damage your wall, which I love. I did make a mistake though, and I will warn everyone because it was not good. When I was doing this, I was trying to do it by myself. I recommend it's a 2-person job because it starts to roll on itself and then you might tear it. It was like a nightmare to do by myself. Definitely, it's a 2-person job. So definitely do that, because then you might end up ripping it and you have to buy. They're very cheap, but then you end up having to wait and purchase it again. So yeah, I would recommend definitely do it with have another person there to help you out. And also, I made the mistake because, again, I was doing it by myself. I put it in my, like, one edge in my mouth while I pulled the paper away because it was like a giant sticker, and the adhesive, oh gosh, yeah, completely burned my lips. Don't do that. Don't do that. Just have another person there. Have have another person there. So I was like, yeah, I totally fumbled this. Like it could have gone much, much worse if I had just waited for my husband to help me. I was like, no, I'm going to do it by myself. Bad idea. Yeah. Patricia, I have been purchasing plants that are in small pots, 3 inches. The plants are taking off in growth, and I'm not sure how soon I can repot them. And when I do, what size pot should I use? Good question. This is going to depend on the species. So there are some species that have much more fibrous, shallow roots. Things especially like peperomia, for instance, that while they might be shooting out a lot of growth, underneath the substrate, like underneath that soil surface, they don't really need a bigger pot. So while the top might look like, oh my God, this thing is overflowing, it doesn't need to be repotted. It's not the case for all types of plants, of course, but it's just knowing what kind of species. So things like peperomia, I wouldn't worry about having to repot. Things like Haworthia or aloes, also don't worry about it. But if you are going to be going up a size in pot, I would recommend going no more than 2 inches wider and 2 inches taller. So if it's a 3-inch pot, the most you're going to want to go is 5-inch wider. So 5 inches, most you're going to want to go. And in terms of how deep was the original pot, just check that and don't go more than 2 inches more than that. And the why, because many folks might go, but why? What's the problem? I have a 7-inch pot that I want to use. Okay. The issue is that when you take out that root ball and you're putting it into this much larger pot, you might think, oh yeah, it's going to be great. It's going to spread out. It's going to be really happy. It's going to grow really big. But what's actually happening is that that can only use that root system can only use so much water. And if there's a rapid change in the volume of substrate around it, this means that there's much more moisture retention happening. There's much more soil or cocoa coir or peat or whatever it is that might be in your mix. There's much more of it now. So that means there's more water being held, and that root system can only at that time manage to deal with the volume that it was working with. So now if you're making that twice as big or 3 times as big, there's too much water. The plant cannot keep up. The plant can't grow its roots out fast enough to manage this huge change of real estate. And so what ends up happening is it starts to drown. It's too much water. It can't take it up. It's staying wet longer, cascade, bunch of issues. So potential root rot, the roots start to suffocate because they can't get enough access to oxygen. It's just too much water in there because it basically becomes very like mud, essentially. Yeah.
So the plants I'm talking about are more Hoya, philodendrons, and African violet.
Okay.
Now I know the African violet probably could stay in the pot it's in. It's putting out a lot of leaves, but I think it's okay.
Yes.
It's more the Hoyas and the philodendrons that I'm unsure of.
Okay. So with the Hoyas, I would wait till the roots are escaping the pot. And the same with the philodendrons. So philodendrons, they do tend to like to be root bound. If you can no longer see any soil, like you only see roots, or the roots are completely cracking the pot or escaping, then that's a good sign to do that. With Hoya, also, you want to wait till the roots are actively escaping, because a lot of Hoyas have pretty shallow roots. I've noticed when I'm repotting my own Hoya, sometimes the plant might look huge and the root system is like this little this little thing. So yeah, just play it by ear. Look at really what's going on. If there's actually room for those roots. If there is no more room for those roots to grow, that's definitely up that pot size.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Let's see here. Hank, can you recommend covering plants with plastic after good watering when you go on vacation for several weeks? Good question. Yes, this was a common hack before, like the 70s and 80s, and even before that, but definitely became really popular during that time, where you cover your plant with a plastic bag. Nowadays, like things like Ziploc, if you're going to be going away. So yes and no. So this might be good for a plant that does require like a high amount of humidity. So it will appreciate definitely the added humidity. But other plants, things like a succulent or something like an African violet, which is a great example. What happens when you have a dome or a plastic bag or even like a plastic bin that you're using as a propagation box, what happens is the condensation builds up. So the water droplets settle on the sides, right, due to evaporation, and then they end up falling right back onto the plant. Kind of rains inside, not the true cycle, of course, but it just falls because of gravity. So what ends up happening is that your leaves are saturated or moist for long periods of time. Now, there are some plants that don't want that moisture on their leaves. And now with no ventilation, the air is pretty stagnant in there, right? There's no holes. They have moisture on their leaves that can start to rot some species. So be wary of that. But it can be for smaller things like begonias or these plants, they might appreciate that. I would actually recommend using like the big plastic bins, the clear plastic bins. That might actually work a little bit better for that purpose. But know that by doing that, you are now setting them up in like a new kind of microclimate. So when you come back home, you actually have to slowly get them out of that again. So if you just take off the bag and go, okay, I'm back home, back to regular schedule programming, what ends up happening is the plants, whoa, I was like in this really nice humid environment. What is this? And now, because now the situation has changed. So you do have to acclimate them all over again. What you could do is start opening the bag, then put it on for a couple hours, leave it and do this for a couple days. If you have them in a bin, leave it open for an hour or two, close it again. The next day, leave it open for 3 to 4 hours. And then the next day, 5 to 6 to 7, and go on until the plants are now used to your regular humidity again. Because by you putting them into this new environment, they're going to acclimate to that environment, and then you have to reacclimate them. This is a common issue also with plants that we keep in cabinets. So like I have my plant cabinet, and it's the same thing. If I take that plant out of that, it's really happy in the cabinet, I take it out, totally different situation. So the plant will start to crisp. It's not doing well, has to go back in the cabinet. If I really wanted, I just put it in the cabinet for a while to build up some growth because it was like a propagation, but I want it outside of the cabinet, then I really have to do an acclimation process little by slowly to get it used to the new situation instead of just a random shift, because that can cause leaves to drop, yellowing, bunch of things that can happen. A plant can go into shock. So yeah, but you can do that. You can. I would just recommend a plastic container instead of the plastic bag. It's because it's easier to manage. So Deanna is asking, since African violets was mentioned, when is the time to repot? Great question. So with African violets, they're very deceptive because the top tends to spread, right? So like almost like a rosette, right? They're growing in this really beautiful kind of dome. Think of it like a half sphere. So what happens is that when their leaves are growing out of the pot, a lot of folks start to think, oh, it's getting so wide, it needs a wider pot. But that's not the case. The roots are actually pretty compact. They like to be root bound. So African violets can go years without being repotted. So they are not something you have to remember, oh my gosh, I got to repot it every spring or something like that. You do not have to do that. So they're much better off if you just wait until their roots are escaping the drainage holes, or until you can actively see the roots in the pot. So when you look down into the pot, you can see the roots and they're starting to like girdle themselves. Essentially, they start to go in a circle because they can't grow anywhere else. So you start to actually see them. You see the roots coming, less soil. You see them escaping the bottom of the drainage holes. That's okay. It's root bound. That it wants to escape. That it's at that point that then you can repot. If you do it before, you actually risk shocking the African violet. They tend to really just hanging out in their pot for years at a time. So it's not something you have to really keep up with.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. Truly appreciate it. Happy Monday. And I'm glad that, again, I get to connect with everyone. I really love this format, and I can't say it enough. I'm just happy that I get to hear folks and I can see you. And I can actually see your plants. I love that so much. So yes, thank you. I really appreciate it. I hope that it was informative. Next week is an open forum. So come just ready to hang out. Feel free. You can ask questions. It's like anything goes. So if you want to share anything, if you want to show some of your collection or things like that, a laid back type of thing. Yeah, I hope you'll take part. I hope I'll see you then. Enjoy definitely the rest of your week. Please have a safe week. It's crazy out there. So please stay safe and happy planting, everyone. Bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
You're very welcome. Bye-bye.